Back before flashlights and widespread lighting of houses and cities, I would imagine that you'd park the vehicle and then you would walk into the house with the lamp or around the back or what have you. So.
Well, hello guys, this is Katie with Vintage and Vinyl, and I'm here with a special friend today.
How's it going, guys? I'm David Steinhauer with Clutch the Moment podcast, and today we're at my old work.
Which is very exciting. So
Yeah.
What is this place, David? Because it's filled with a lot of really cool cars.
This is my buddy Justin's little pet project. We are at Art in Motion, Art''in Motion. This is a vintage and classic car consignment slash collection slash race team. So we do a little bit of everything as long as it's cool and it involves four wheels. As you can see, I mean, we're in front of the split window Corvette. This is a new piece that Justin just picked up. And yeah, this is a perfect example of some of the fun stuff we get to around here.
That is just amazing. Now, this is located in St. Augustine, Florida, is that right?
Here we are, yeah, we're on San Marco Avenue, which is basically the outskirts of Old Town. So right down the road, we've got the deaf school and some of the really historic buildings. And this building is kind of designed to evoke some of that. We've got the brick, we've got some industrial elements, the big, steel work and some of the hand railing and stuff. Just pulling a lot of different elements in from the city and making this feel as homogeneous as possible, I guess.
I love the vintage industrial design, particularly with all these cars, because I think it just pairs so perfectly together.
Yeah. I mean, you want to talk about classic metal, it's there and it's also around us, And actually, this truck is a perfect example of the variety, right? You've got the 60s, this truck is an early 2000s. It is a Ram with the Viper engine. This is kind of an oddball thing that Dodge did in the late 90s, early 2000s. That Viper engine is like an 8-liter V10 or something like that. And Justin's a very shrewd guy because he doesn't just collect the stuff that's old. This is a perfect example of something that is about to really start appreciating. These early 2000s cars are coming out of being too old to be modern, but not old enough to be retro yet. They're starting to climb back into their valuable retrospective or classic phase. So all this kind of stuff, or the Fast and Furious era stuff, that's appreciating right now. And Justin has always done a really good job of just being a little bit ahead of the curve. So,
excellent. So is he planning on selling these cars when they get to their top value?
all of these cars are for sale. Most of them. I'll show you one that's not. But yeah, most of these cars are for sale and they're just waiting for the right buyer. He's not super motivated to find the right buyer because he does enjoy the cars while he has them.
They're pretty sweet.
Everything here is for sale. And actually, I have some favorites to show you, but let's go ahead and start down here.
Now, David, I'm curious, how did you get connected with this? Because this is a pretty interesting place here.
Oh man, so I actually joined the race team, which we can talk about later, about 3 years ago. Maybe more. I started working for one of the other drivers at the race shop. His name was Jacob Mosler, and we can talk about him and his family story in a little bit, but worked for him for several months, and then he joined Team SLR, which is the back half of this building, and so I got involved in this facility and Team SLR doing Trans Am racing, which is, as I'll show you, a very purpose-built, focused race series, but it all started actually with Scott Lagasse Sr. in this car. So this is a C4 Corvette, or fourth generation Corvette. This is one of the first things the Lagasse family raced. You can see Jack Wilson Chevy, one of the Northeast Florida Chevy dealerships, was his sponsor. This is the Spirit of St. Augustine. And this car was really interesting because it was a lot of things could not be modified. You can see the interior still pretty much stock. The wheels and tires and suspension, I believe, were all more or less very limited to the series. Engines had to be just as they left the factory, more or less. But the more things that are limited or controlled, the more you start to see really interesting innovation in different ways. So this is when GM was testing their ABS and stability control, which is kind of the first electronically controlled traction system. And so that was really fun, he says. Not really. It was actually kind of a pain for Scott Sr. to work around, but that is what led to a lot of the modern stuff we use today in street cars that have, you know, wheel speed sensors and can correct a slide. And that started with this era, these mid-'80s, you know. Lotus actually also had a hand in that. Lotus was part of the GM family in the 80s. So yeah, that's a very interesting car. Of course, plenty of other Corvettes around. That's a C3.
And when did this car come out here, David?
This C3 is a mid-'70s, I think. I'm not exactly sure. I've driven a convertible C3 kind of like this. Unfortunately, I don't think they drive as good as they look. I like either the 4th gen or the 2nd gen, which is that split window we just saw. But these cars have a great shape, the Stingray body shape, and they're really, they're very iconic. So some people love them, and you can see why.
I have to say the shape on this particular Corvette is really excellent.
Yeah, the big flared wheel arches. It is fun. It's got a great view out over the hood, that's for sure.
I like how it is kind of wider in the front and then slims down in the back.
Yeah, it's a very Coke bottle shape.
Yes, very.
Yeah.
Man, that's cool. And then we've got some other classic cars down this way,
yeah.
which look pretty interesting to me.
We have more upstairs as well.
Wow.
So.
Now, is this building open to the public?
This is open to the public. Justin would like you to schedule a tour if at all possible, so the phone number is on the door or online. But yeah, he loves showing people his cars when he gets a chance. He's out of town right now. I wish that he was here to give the tour himself, but I love this little Alfa. I love any Italian cars that aren't red.
Yes, and that's kind of unusual, isn't it, David?
Yeah, this is a lovely forest green, not to be confused with British racing green. But this Alfa is a lot of fun. It is a gorgeous little car, and it sounds really cool. It definitely doesn't have a rumble. It's more of a rasp that car has, and it's delightful.
I have to say that wood-handled steering wheel just is amazing with that interior. Wow, check that out. Man, that green is so incredible.
Then this car is one of Justin's pride and joys. So this is called a Hakasuka. This is a first-generation Nissan Prince GTR. These cars are getting critical acclaim right now. This is the car of the moment because Nissan GTRs in the 90s are just barely starting to get legal to import. So the 90s versions that we all remember playing video games about but were forbidden for American market are now importable, and people are starting to remember where all of that came from. So this car is late 60s, I think a 68 or 69, and it has a 2-liter inline 6 that revs to almost 8,000 RPM.
Wow.
So you can imagine the production methods and the tolerances that are necessary to get an engine spinning that fast in a production car in the 60s. This is one of the, I would say, the most precisely made vehicles of the time. And You know, this car is, I'm not sure exactly a price on it, but this is a 6-figure car.
That's just amazing. And you can definitely tell those headlights look a little 60s.
Yeah, they do. Japan definitely went through an era of very reminiscent styling. This car looks very 60s. The Celicas of the period were very influenced by Mustangs and Camaros of the 60s. Japan hadn't really found out who they were, or they didn't have a particular flavor that they were giving off until maybe the late 70s, early 80s. And then they ruled the world. And that's why we have such nostalgia for the GTRs that came later, because they were a force to be reckoned with. This car is iconic in a completely different way. This is a Jag E-Type, and it is a gorgeous shape. Enzo Ferrari called this car the most attractive car ever designed. Paraphrasing, of course, because I don't know Italian. But you can see it just has a gorgeous shape. It was light years ahead of its time in terms of suspension, independent suspension. I believe this car had disc brakes back when everybody else had drums. And it was cheap. That was the amazing thing. It was an attainable sports car or supercar, kind of one of the first. This ethos is actually what Corvettes ended up being later down the line, sort of faster than anything, cheaper than it, cheaper than anything, faster than it. And that's been a winning philosophy. So it kind of started here.
I love the shape of that car.
It's gorgeous, and especially as you come to like a 3/4 view and you see the rear haunch. Chef's kiss. Love this car.
That is such a beauty. And then this one, I have to say, might be one of my favorites here.
This is such an interesting car. This Accord is, okay, so I'm actually just going to cheat and read off the spec sheet here.
That's okay, you're allowed.
Four-wheel drive cars, and the first car with pop-up headlights. This is a very interesting car, and I think they bought it at Amelia Island, which is the big auction we have here every year.
Is that where the Concours d'Elegance is?
Correct, yes. So the auctions are the side events coming off of that Concours. And Justin is a emphatic participant in the Concours every year. He's volunteered, he's participated in events, that kind of thing.
And can you tell everybody who probably doesn't know what that is, what that is?
Oh my gosh, it's the best weekend ever. So it is more or less a festival of classic and antique cars. The main event is Sunday, but all throughout the week there are actually events. It's held at the Ritz-Carlton on Amelia Island, very fancy. A lot of events are outdoors on the golf course or on the grounds of the hotel. And so yeah, it's just a week-long extravaganza. And throughout the driveway of the Ritz-Carlton, different manufacturers will bring their press fleets to test drive. So any Joe Schmo like me can hop in line for 5 minutes and then, you know, get a ride or drive a Porsche, a Jag, an Aston,
cool.
Lexus. So I've been very fortunate to drive a bunch of expensive metal myself, mostly because of that event. And you also rub shoulders with, like, Jay Leno's there fairly often, Jerry Seinfeld and his buddies, all the Porsche community are there very often. Last year I saw Freddy Tavares Hernandez, which is a YouTuber who rebuilds exotic cars. And yeah, it is the major event here on the East Coast, I would say, for any kind of modern, vintage, exotic, classic, any kind of cool car. You can find an event, a side event that week that features it.
And it really is worth the trip, folks. So make sure you come down here to Art in Motion and then check out the Concours d'Elegance.
That's right, yeah. And Justin has hosted a few events here, some of them for Porsche, but some of them are just general. And I do wonder if there might be something that goes on concurrently here. Maybe you can make the trip down to beautiful St. Augustine.
It is worth it. There's a lot of history here, folks. All right, and this car right here, check this out.
Yeah, this is a Ford Torino that these guys actually went through a restoration with the TV show called Speed is the New Black, which I think is on Speed Channel. No, Velocity, excuse me. It's not Speed anymore. This is a really interesting car. This 429 Cobra Jet engine was famously very underrated. Ford lied about how much horsepower it actually made. It was much faster than you would expect, given that it claimed, I think, 300 horsepower. Actually made more like 400.
Wow.
Sometimes manufacturers sandbag and they pull punches, and cars become legendary because they are much faster than the manufacturer claims originally. So.
And I love the fade on this stripe down the side of the car. That just is so cool looking.
Yeah. Another very iconic 1970.
Very, very 70s.
Yeah.
Man, these are very
You want
cool.
to talk about vintage and vinyl? Look how much vinyl is on that vinyl interior.
Lots and lots of vinyl. Just a different type. And we've got this here. What is
This
this?
Fun Triumph. I actually don't know too much about this bike. It looks like it's a parallel twin. I don't know a ton about vintage motorcycles, unfortunately. I wish I could say more, but I actually don't remember seeing that recently. That might be a new acquisition.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
you guys will have to come down and take the tour and learn more about that piece. I mean, this is just paradise for anyone that loves old cars, vintage history, and of course all things industrial, because I mean the ceiling is just fantastic in here.
Yeah. And these cars rotate in and out all the time. There's more upstairs, and usually there's people wrenching on race cars in the back, so that's fun to watch as well. They do weddings and other kinds of venues, or this is a venue for other kinds of events. So yeah, contact these guys if you want to book any car lover's birthday or wedding or anything, all of the above. Move cars around, we can set it up however you want. So.
And I'll put the link to their website in the description box so you guys can check them out more in depth. So is there more to see, David?
There is more to see. You want to head upstairs?
Yep. All right, folks, we'll be back with you in a second. Well, folks, we made it back upstairs, and there is some really cool cars. Check this piece out.
Yeah, so this is a vintage Toyota Land Cruiser, famously indestructible. These cars are sold all over the world for all kinds of harsh climates, and their simplicity is really kind of their selling feature. So this is a very agricultural vehicle. It does not drive like a car, it drives like a tractor. But again, that is its claim to fame. And this one is restored, but not over-restored, in my opinion. It's still got a lot of utilitarianism, true to the original design. And man, this would be a great beach cruiser, or, you know, classic car to put around town.
And when you say that some people over-restore them, what do you mean?
I just mean that they kind of take the original essence away. So they do custom colors, or they do really bright, flashy stuff. And to me, that is almost false, or it's almost getting too far removed from the original intent of the vehicle. So this was intended to be a farm implement, merely. Like, it was intended to be a go-anywhere, utilitarian, payload capacity carrying kind of vehicle. And this is as nice as you're going to get, but it's not blingy. It's not overly modern. It's just true to form. There is one company that does crazy restorations of these Toyota Land Cruisers. It's called Icon, and I actually have talked with them. They are super, super cool. They're out of California, and they redo everything. But they redo it in the same utilitarian style. They just remove every piece of plastic. Plastic is not allowed on any of their vehicles. They mill everything out of aluminum custom.
Oh,
It's
wow.
insanely expensive. but it basically means every single part of the truck is as bulletproof as the engine is, as the axles are. Every single aspect of the vehicle is that timeless, indestructible.
Good American-made quality, right?
That's right, yes. And this is a Japanese vehicle, this Toyota, but it's the start of Japan really leaning into its precision and its longevity, and which are its strengths even today. So
this is so cool.
Yeah.
Just a neat car. And yes, for the beach, like you said, around here, I mean, this would be wonderful.
Got the jump seats in the back, so you're facing each other.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
That's really neat. Look at that, guys.
It wouldn't pass any kind of NHTSA safety, but it's a lot of fun. It's a
Are
very
there
unique experience.
seat belts in the back?
No.
Oh.
I don't think there's seatbelts in the front.
Probably not for a farm vehicle. I mean, you know, you're just cruising around.
Right. You're left to your own devices.
And what about this beauty here? Now, this car is incredible.
Model 8 red van. This is actually not Justin's. It is on more or less permanent loan from another family, I believe, and has a lot of sentimental value to them. But these guys, and I think the Bozards, who own a dealership out here, several dealerships out in Northeast Florida area, have a lot of these older Fords. They're very cool to see.
Now, how common are these Model A's here?
They made a ton of them. They're not actually super rare. Of course, to see one still surviving and in this good condition is quite rare. So, very interesting vehicle. And again, Model T's are designed to be as simple as possible. They're designed to be very utilitarian. But the Model A, with its hard enclosed top and some of these other features, it makes it much more of a luxurious experience. A Model T is very hard to drive. It has a bunch of things going on other than just gas and brake. It's got friction bands, and it's got all kinds of advance and retard spark, and it's a very complex thing to drive. My understanding is the Model A's are a little simpler and more straightforward. And they're designed to be that way because they're more of a luxury item.
Now, what about the back? What does this car have in its long back?
This was a delivery truck of some kind, and so there's actually nothing back there except for some really nice wood finish treatment in there, which is really cool. Yeah, this would have been a fairly nice delivery vehicle, maybe for Wells Fargo or something, some kind of shipping service. So.
You do see those old photographs of these particular vehicles with the cool logo on the side for different deliveries.
You can imagine Coca-Cola in its infancy or something on the side of this, for sure.
That is just incredible. So what else do you have to show us here, David?
Speaking of going in the back, actually first, let's talk really quick about the car lift, which makes everything possible.
Man, look at that. So this lifts all the cars from the first level to the second level, is that right?
Yep, and tools and big parts, engines and so forth. That's actually what I've used this for most, is getting parts to and from the race shop. And we can take a look at that real quick.
Now, David, how many tons can this particular elevator hold?
I have no idea. It's probably plenty. I mean, this whole building is hurricane rated, and that means the lift has to be hurricane rated. And I don't know exactly what that means, but I remember Justin saying that it was a pretty laborious process, that it was pretty over-designed. So
you have to be. In Florida, the hurricanes are no joke here.
Yeah, and we're here at the epicenter, right? Downtown St. Augustine. We can walk to the intracoastal, in 5 minutes. So the water's always here, the hurricanes are always here, and you have to plan for that.
Well, let's go take a look at something else really cool.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a little behind the scenes.
That's right, top secret. Don't tell anyone we were here.
Ooh, what's in this room? Ta-da!
So this is the storage area. Each of these rooms back here are race car parts. And when I was working here, there's wiring, there's chassis parts here, and then I think this one was hoses and fittings and plumbing stuff. It's all organized. And I did some of the organization. That was me as an intern. But here, right in front of us, is the Falker's long play, I think. This is the very last Mitsubishi Evo to ever come off the factory. Now, these cars were famous rally cars. They found a lot of success in rallying, and Mitsubishi just kind of lost momentum and actually has dwindled into basically nothing. I say Mitsubishi, really I mean Mitsubishi Automotive, because Mitsubishi actually makes AC units, shipping containers, they make all kinds of industrial stuff, electronics supply. Cars were not their main bread and butter. They were probably a side hobby for the CEO or something like that. So it's sad that we don't have these anymore. They were really cool, all-wheel drive, you know, nimble, fun to drive rally cars. But they're not there anymore. So.
That's a shame, but this is cool that this example exists here at Art in Motion.
It's the very last one ever made.
And I got to show you these lights because I'm kind of fascinated by these. What are they made out of? Obviously some sort of aluminum or metal.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure if that's aluminum or if that's stainless steel.
Oh, it could be stainless steel.
They're all coiled in a very interesting way with LEDs poking through.
The movement and that is just so interesting. And again, kind of reminiscent of all these cars that we're surrounded by.
Right, bringing together the art and the motion. It's kind of fun. So this is a RX7, or in Japan I think they were called a Savannah. I've actually driven the second generation of these, but this is the first. It doesn't have pistons. This car is actually a rotary engine. So in operational principle, it's kind of similar to a two-stroke. You do have to add oil to the gas.
And why is that?
It's a very unique design. Instead of a piston going up and down, it actually has a triangle that spins in an oval cavity. So the triangle rubs on the sides of the oval, and you have to lubricate that connection or else it will wear really bad.
Ah, I see.
So why is this basically the only rotary powered car in existence? Because Mazda was the only one gutsy enough to try something so radically different. And we're not going to talk about any of the NSU or the oddballs. In mass production, Mazda was the only one. And it was a very compact engine, it was very lightweight, and all the weight was down in the center of the car where it's easy to deal with. Obviously, if the weight's up high in the car, it makes the car want to lean or pitch when it's braking. So having weight low is the number 2 priority after having no weight at all, right? That's the number 1. The engine also made a ton of power for how small it was. They are really thirsty on gas though. That's a 1.3 liter that drinks fuel like a V8.
And that wouldn't be good in today's expensive fuel market.
No, the most recent rotary to come out of Mazda or anywhere, I think, is the RX8, which is the successor to this car, and they stopped in like 2008. And I don't see a rotary ever coming back, frankly. But very unique power band, almost similar to a motorcycle. They're very revvy, or free revving, so they respond very quickly to the gas pedal. And it just makes the whole car feel lively and nimble. And this car actually is extremely lightweight. I think it weighs about 2,300 pounds. So here, Katie, you and I need to probably lift it, frankly. But yeah, this is a really fun car. And again, this is a mid-'80s car that I think is starting to see a lot of appreciation. And Justin is very shrewd about what things are going to appreciate in the near future. So.
And I think that's kind of important. A lot of my viewers are coming from the antique and vintage world, and it's important to kind of appreciate trends and follow along with what might be the next big thing. And that's the same, I guess, here with cars.
Yeah, everything has a life cycle, right? Where it's retro, actually, excuse me, it's new and modern, and then it's not as new, it's secondhand, right? And then it goes through a lull where it's not old enough to be retro yet, and then it starts being ironic cool. The hipsters like it, right? Like fountain pen or something. And then it will go back into its full-blown classic status. And for cars, what I found the most success with is to find unique traits that can't be replicated anywhere else. Whether it's the very buzzy, free-revving, lightweight nature of that RX7, or whether it's the build quality and the precision of that classic Japanese manufacturing. There are certain feelings and certain experiences that you can't find anywhere else. And that's kind of what my podcast is about. How these things, these objects, can combine a certain kind of trait that will make you feel a certain experience. So,
and David, where can people find your podcast? Is it live yet?
It's not live yet, but I'm working on it. I have a few episodes recorded, and I want to start airing after I've recorded the full series. But once I do, it will be on Clutch the Moment on Facebook, Instagram, Apple Podcasts, Google. It may or may not be on Spotify. I'm not sure if that integration is working yet. And then the video ones that I do will also be on my YouTube channel. So Clutch the Moment everywhere.
That is going to be amazing.
Everything. So
awesome, David.
Last car to show. Do you want to check it out?
Yes, and I kind of want to show this table quickly as we're passing by, because look at the base of this beauty. Probably an old work table from a factory. Just absolutely stunning. Perfect industrial design. What a great way to turn these old bases into tables. I love it.
Hobbs Manufacturing, Worcester, Mass.
Oh, so beautiful. All right, now we're going to go back to the cars and look at this last beauty here.
This is a steam-powered vehicle. And this is fairly new. I think Justin's had this car for about a year now. And it is a very interesting piece. Back before internal combustion really, I guess, asserted itself completely, there were all kinds of steam or electric or propane or all kinds of different novel ways to power a horseless carriage. Now, this vehicle is actually more affordable than you might imagine, mostly because there's a very famous race called the London to Brighton, which only allows vehicles from 1906 and before. It's a reenactment of when the laws in the UK first opened the roads to horseless carriages, basically. Before that time, before 1906, you had to run in front of the vehicle with a flag. You had to hire someone to wave a flag to let people know your vehicle was coming. As if the...
wasn't enough.
Yeah, right. But nevertheless, in 1906, that law was repealed. This is my understanding anyway. And so they do a big reenactment of that every year. And cars just 1 year older than this are massively expensive compared to this. Now, this is still a very cool piece, and I don't know the exact price, but Justin was really commenting how much he enjoyed this vehicle compared to more affordable than you might expect, I guess. That's the name of the game, is to find something that brings you joy. And if you can get it for more affordable, that's always a plus. So.
It is. Now, can you tell me about these pieces here? Are these actually lamps?
They are actually lamps. Yeah, so I don't know a ton about these pieces here, but clearly they're removable, right? There would be a handle, and this grub screw is not like a hard attachment. You just loosen that and lift the thing off. So I don't know if they would be for signaling or if they would be for, grab it and go. But yeah, very interesting pieces. the brass work back then is just so fun to see.
It really is.
Raised.
The detail on this is just amazing, and the craftsmanship. Now, why were these removable? Was there a point to that?
I mean, back before flashlights and widespread lighting of houses and cities, I would imagine that you'd park the vehicle and then you would walk into the house with the lamp or around the back or what have you. So
Interesting. And this has a little piece in the back, like a trunk almost?
talking about
This hatch right here.
Yeah, that is for handbags and stuff. You definitely couldn't get a duffel bag in there, but yeah.
That is just absolutely
And
cool.
I love the curve. It's very nautical, I guess, kind of how this car is tapered. Of course, this is 50 years before we knew anything about aerodynamics. And the car didn't go fast enough to really make it matter, but that's still very reminiscent of boats.
Very, including all the brass as well on this car. And check out the Cadillac right there on the footstep.
That's right.
That is just cool.
Even the mud flaps here, that's really fantastic.
It's amazing those have survived all these years.
Yeah. Wood spokes.
Oh, and I love the color, that classic red, green, and black. Such a gorgeous car.
Yeah, very vivid. You definitely weren't bashful if you had a car in this time period. You wanted everyone to know about your horseless carriage.
Yes, you would be a big, important person if you had something of that caliber then.
Yeah.
All right, so David, are we going anywhere next?
You want to see some race cars?
Yeah, let's check out the race car shop.
Everybody's left and we're not in anyone's way. I'd say let's go.
All right, we'll be right back, folks. Okay, guys, so we are in the race shop, and this is where they work on all the cars. I'm going to give you a little tour here, and David's going to be able to tell you things a little bit more in depth than I can. But I'm loving all of these parts bins on the side of the wall. You guys know me well enough. You know how much that kind of thing excites me. What a fun little machine shop. So David, tell us more about this.
If I had $1 every time Scotty said, "We got to get organized," I would make a lot more money than I did at the race shop, that's for sure. He loves his organization. So, yeah, this is all the sheet metal area. We have brakes, we have bending guides, we have milling machine over there, and a lathe. Just anything we need to build custom pieces. A lot of these parts are kind of standardized. They're made for a particular spec of racing. So, for example, we can't really modify the engine. We can't modify some aspects of the shocks, some aspects of the suspension, some aspects of the body. But the things that we can modify are the roll cage, the actual structure. We make that here in-house with M1 Fast Track, so, which is our sister company. So we have a jig across the street, which is a big table with bolt-on clamps that bolt down in certain positions, and that way we can replicate that chassis design over and over again every single time. So we build all the race cars here. And I remember one particular time we had sold a seat, meaning somebody else was coming in to race one of our cars, and we had just crashed one of the other cars, and we had decided that we would make a race car to fill the need that we had. In 10 days, we turned a pile of metal tubes and a bunch of parts around the shop into a race car. And at that time, I was ordering the parts for this place. So I probably placed $60,000 worth of orders in 10 days to build that car. A lot of overnighting parts, and we did it. That car actually participated and did well in that race, and then the next race went on to place second or third at Daytona at the hands of Sam Mayer, who was one of our development drivers. So we were really proud of that. This is where that all happened. This is the rapid construction environment. Plenty of space and lots of tools.
It must have been cool to be part of something so cool like that, and how fast it had to all come together.
I'm very religious, and I take Sundays off, and I still work 74 hours that week.
Wow.
So, to give you an idea, it was a mad dash for sure. So, to go along with all of our stationary tools, this is the stuff that we bring on the road. This is our big pit box. It all rolls into a trailer, and it's custom made for us. So we have the end cabinets and each of the drawers here that are locking. So they're not going to come out in transit, which is nice. This TV can send either race results or coverage or some pit crew information, or crew chief information. A lot of times the crew chief will have telemetry on board the car, so he can see how the engine's doing, how the tires are doing, if we need to make changes. And that data can be fed through here so that we can say, hey, next pit stop, 2 rounds on the front shocks, which means stiffen them up a little bit. And so, it's a very high-tech redneck motorsport.
That is cool. I love the locking drawers on that piece.
Yeah. And here's our newest car, as it turns out. I don't know how much I can comment on this or not. Definitely don't want to speak out of turn. But this car is being assembled. So we have this M1 chassis that we fabricated. Steel structure here, chromoly. And this car, in a lot of ways, is similar to a NASCAR in that it's got that steel structure, it's got a plastic body shell, it definitely doesn't have a ton of parts from a real Camaro. We are supposed to use the mirrors, the side view mirrors from a real Camaro. And actually, over here on the table, we have an engine that is reasonably close to a stock Camaro engine. So this is an LS engine. These engines are famous for being kind of the go-to aftermarket engine. They make a bunch of power. They're not actually that big. You can see it's a pretty compact engine. I am not at liberty to disclose how much power this engine makes. That is a closely guarded secret. K-Tech make these motors just north of Detroit, and I actually may have picked this exact engine up for them back in the day, or one just like it. But they do a bunch of minor work to it to basically bring this to the ideal of what it left the factory with. It's called blueprinting. So the idea is that it is the perfect example of an unmodified engine, right? That's its main limitation. It makes things much closer, because otherwise you can spend $50 million developing, which is what NASCAR does, developing an open engine that, it becomes cost prohibitive and it really prevents a lot of competition. So to have them limited like this, where it's the stock airbox, it's a throttle body of a certain size, it's all these limitations, and you wouldn't be too impressed, frankly, with the amount of power that this car makes. It's certainly a 6.2 liter V8, but it's not going to set the world on fire. That being said, cars only weigh about 2,800 pounds. So they're significantly lighter than a street car, and they do get up and go, These cars run lap times similar to, for example, like a 911 GT2 RS, which is a very fast Porsche, like 700 or 800 horsepower from the factory. So to be able to do that with a solid rear axle and an engine with a push rod, a cannon block design, they're no slouch. That's what I'm trying to say. And if you don't understand cars, the important thing is we're using a lot of very old school technology in these cars. Part of that is intentional to keep the cost down. Part of that is just tradition, I guess. Stock cars, like NASCARs, have famously kind of held with a formula and have not messed with it. And it was big news when they got away from carburetors. It was big news when this new car came out, the NASCAR Next, about a year ago. It has all kinds of more modern features. But ironically, NASCARs went from being cutting edge in the 60s and 70s to being very antiquated. And so the development into technology to make those cars faster wasn't helping anybody. So now, the more modern NASCAR ideally would be a little more applicable to cars that you would hopefully see in the coming days.
Now, what kind of circuit of racing is these cars a part of?
These run road courses, which means they turn both right and left. They're not just ovals. These cars run at, for example, like Daytona, VIR, Lime Rock, Road Atlanta. There is a series, a Trans Am series. They will go to different locations. And there was just recently a Trans Am race at Portland. Scotty was telling me they actually weren't able to make that one. But we do a lot of racing, especially in the Southeast. And we also did some racing in California recently. So a lot of transit, a lot of travel. And my job here with the race team was a lot of cleaning the trailer, loading and unloading the cars, sorting the tools. Everybody does that. No matter how fancy your job title is, our crew chief was cleaning fasteners. You know, like everybody pitches in and helps. And this car, you know, like I said, it's pretty simple and straightforward. It's designed to be that way. So changes are easy to make, and the upkeep on the car is pretty simple. We definitely don't have to tear down the engine every race like NASCAR's or a more expensive racing series. So yeah, a lot of our work is making it happen.
Now, how many cars actually do need to get fixed on the road as they're going from race to race?
Oh my gosh. So anything can happen, and that's racing. It's pretty common. There's always stuff to do. There is always stuff to do. And the beautiful thing about Scotty and about Jacob and about any good race driver is that they know exactly what the car needs next, and they never run out of ideas. So a lot of it comes down to very fine changes to try something and then no, that's not fast, or go back. The other half of my job was picking this car off the ground, pulling the tires off, pulling the shocks out, changing something very minor about the shocks, putting them back in, putting the tires on, putting the car on the ground. We race, we try it, no, it doesn't work. Pick the car up off the ground, pull the tires off, pull the suspension out, change another minor thing, put it back in, put the tires on, put it on the ground, try it again. There's a lot of that. It's an iterative process, and it can feel very repetitive, but then you remind yourself that you're playing with race cars, and it feels way better. So.
Now, I'm sure the travel is very, very expensive on all of the cars, especially getting all the crew and drivers to their locations.
That's right. So we actually have a toter home, which is an RV with a big trailer. 2 cars go in the top of the trailer. You can actually access a bunch of stuff from below, which is nice. A bunch of tools in the main body of the trailer. There's a big tent that comes off the side of the trailer where you work on these. And then yeah, the body of the truck is like a 6-person sleeping RV. And that defrays costs significantly. But yeah, there's a lot of hotel bills and travel bills and fuel.
Oh yes,
fuel.
I'm sure.
So yeah, these cars go all around the country, and they do so at a staggering pace. And if it's not a race, the boys just left for testing in South Carolina, right? We need to find the location that most closely replicates what race is coming up next, and that happened to be South Carolina. So yeah, always traveling, always on the go, and most repairs actually happen on the road. And so you'll see, I mean, if the boys were working right now, honestly, this stuff would be accessed, but a lot of the tools stay in the trailer. So you'll just go out to the trailer and grab stuff as if we have air conditioning here, but otherwise it's not that different from what we would do on the road.
Well, I'm sure you have to always be ready with every tool and every part possible, so having them in the trailer makes so much more sense.
Because if you're spending $30,000 to $40,000 a weekend just in logistics to get the car there, to get the employees there, You don't want to mess anything up.
No, you don't.
So this is a departure for us. This is obviously not a Trans Am car. This is an Aston Martin. It's a British car. It was built by ProDrive. And this is a very interesting and unique car because it is glued together. Aston wants to say it's bonded aluminum. That's the word that they want to use. But bonded means glue, okay? That's not actually bad. There's nothing less strong about this glue bond, but it is an interesting and unique kind of construction method. So it's got an aluminum frame. This engine, I believe, has been moved back about 6 or 8 inches. It's a huge engine. It's actually more or less 2 V6 engines from a Ford Taurus taped together, this V12.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Stock, these cars, I believe, actually have 2 ECUs that are basically Ford parts. And Aston Martin of this era shares a bunch of parts with Ford. For example, the seat motor on this car, if it still had the stock seats, you would find it in a Super Duty, like a Ford pickup. So this is a really interesting car to work on for the above reasons. And this has been a long-term project for us. This is a big boy European GT race car. It's got shock pots, which sense where the suspension is at any given time. So you can tell, are you too low and you need to come up? Are you loading up the outside of the car too hard on a corner? Any of that kind of thing. A lot of data. This car actually has air jacks, which means you slam a air hose into it and the car just lifts itself. It's got little cylinders that lift all 4 corners. That's a real race car. And that's a long-term project that they kind of chip away at while there's nothing else going on, all the craziness with the normal race team. But that's definitely not the bread and butter.
That is such a fascinating car.
This is an extremely rare and unique car.
It's so low to the ground.
It is, and it's very long, and it's fairly wide. This car was designed with aerodynamics in mind, above all else. And this is actually a long and somewhat fascinating story. You might want to pull up a chair for this one. Wow. And it's really orange. This is called the Photon, for obvious reasons. It's very light, and it's very bright. And, yeah. Long story short, actually, long story long. Are you ready?
We're ready. We're ready for the story.
In the late 1980s, Warren Mosler was a PhD economist. No, hold on. Can't remember if I think he is a PhD economist. He made a bunch of money with number theory, with arbitrage, with a lot of, at that time, very cutting-edge concepts that he either developed or popularized. And his hobby was always engineering. It was always cars. And Warren Mosler is the kind of person that will just make something happen whether or not there's a market for it. So in the 80s, he wanted to build a car that was fiberglass. He had some experience with boats. He knew that Horacio Pagani at the time was really wanting to do something fiberglass with Lamborghini. He's like, I'll do that too. So in the late 80s, he designed a car called the Consigliere, the Mosler Consigliere. It is a really goofy looking car, and it has a 4-cylinder turbo engine from a Dodge, and those things wouldn't sound like much, but the car was so ridiculously fast that it was banned from basically every racing series it entered. It smoked the competition. It was insanely light, it was insanely slippery, but it looked really strange. And they didn't sell very many. Fast forward a couple years, and he's like, hey, this concept had some merit. What can we do to design it a little more aggressively or a little more attractively? And I want to use a V8, not a 4-cylinder this time. And this is what happened. This is the Mosler MT900. This one in particular is called the Photon. The original goal of this car was to weigh 900 kilograms, which is actually lighter than that little Mazda we saw upstairs.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So this car, in all its length, in all its width, in all its downforce, in all its V8, it was supposed to be lighter. And you can feel free to walk around.
It looks extremely aerodynamic.
It is a very slippery car, and there's also a lot of consideration to how to cool different parts of the car. So for example, I don't know, this one doesn't have a rear-mounted radiator. Some of the Consigliers actually have a radiator in the back. If you think about it, that's quite logical, because all the other cars in the world have a radiator in the front.
Makes
but then
sense.
Where does that hot air go? It goes into the rest of the car. So that's just one example of the really brilliant thinking that went into these kinds of cars. And Warren B is actually the smartest human I've ever met. And he's extremely kind too. Very quirky guy. I like him a lot. But these vents, for example, are heat extraction vents. So they will pull air in past the brake and out here. So the brakes cool down.
And is this carbon fiber here?
It's all carbon fiber, the entire car.
Wow, check this out, guys. I mean, this is really cool.
Yep. Unfortunately for Warren B and the MT900, the economy crashed right as these cars were starting to be produced. So they didn't produce a ton of them. Again, there's only about 30 or 40, just like, ironically, the Consigliere. But this car is really exceptional. And despite the fact that it's 15 years old now, I would compare it very favorably to, for example, a McLaren or something, because it's got a big honking LS7 V8 in it, makes a ton of power, and it is a real race car. It's not a race car for the street, like everybody claims. It is a race car that then was made streetable afterwards. It is a homologation car, more or less. So, purpose-built, and check out how the door opens, too.
And I'm pretty sure, since this car here is so unique, that it's probably just adding on the value the more it sits here.
Well, yeah, there's not a ton of them. And I don't know, I mean, it's definitely worth more to Jacob and Warren as a testament to what they could do. But should it ever come up for sale, they can basically name whatever price they want.
I have to say, the way that door opens is pretty interesting.
There we are. So make sure it's all the way closed. This whole front clip comes off in one piece. There's little buckles right here. Slides off. So you can access front suspension and stuff. Same thing with the rear clamshell. This whole body was designed to be pulled off quickly so you can make changes or replace parts. And that's a racing feature, as is the retractable tow hook right here. So, should something happen while you're racing, the car can be towed right here, and there's another retractable tow hook in the rear.
Wow, that is really cool. I mean, the design features of this car are just out of this world.
Every aspect of a Mosler may or may not look goofy, but it's there for a purpose. That has been reiterated to me over and over and over again as I've worked on these cars. I actually didn't drive any MT900s, but I drove a Consigliere, the earlier one with the 4-cylinder. And it was such an interesting experience because that turbo 80s 4-cylinder has a very particular kind of wait, boom, here's the boost, right? Like, it has a very interesting character, and yet the rest of the car is immediate. The rest of the car is so light and so direct, and there's no bushings anywhere in it. It's all hard metal, so it's all just instantly connected to the road, and feels just like a go-kart. And it was a really fascinating car to drive, and I feel very lucky to have been given the chance. So,
That is just incredible.
Anyway, fast forward 30 years, Warren B's son Jacob decides he wants to race as well, and that's where I come in, more or less. So we did a lot of moving these cars around, backing them into this spot, and shuffling them around various garages. And finally Jacob's like, okay, it's time. Let's see what these things can do. So this car will eventually go on a demo track day, and 15 odd years later, we'll see what it can really do.
Oh, I can't wait for that day. Man, David, this has been so interesting here at Art in Motion, all the classic cars with the race shop. Just such a neat day. I'm so glad that we got a chance to share your story and, of course, the story here at Art in Motion. And I hope people will check it out because it's just such an unusual place that I drove by for years in St. Augustine and never really knew what it was. And I'm glad I got a chance to stop in.
Yeah, and I want people to take away through all of this that cool jobs can still be a viable living. That's the number one thing I took away from my time here, because I was raised on the concept that, oh, you don't want to do that, you're not going to make any money doing that. Forget that notion. Because if you do what you love, and you do it to a high standard because you love it, you will become the authority on that pretty quickly, and that's worth money.
Yep, and you'll never work a day in your life if you do what you love.
You'll also never have a day off. So be
That's
prepared
true.
for that, because racing took over my whole life for that time. It was a full-time job and then some, but in a way it was priceless.
That is just awesome, and it's so true. They say that about small businesses. You start a small business, and you end up working more hours than you expected.
That's right, and every race team is a small family-owned business. It looks fancy, it looks glamorous, but really, make friends with the driver or make friends with the family, be a genuine person, and if you want to pursue it, and you're willing to work hard, they're always needing help. Every race team in the world is always needing help. Go sweep floors and see what you can learn.
That's excellent. Thanks, David.
My pleasure.
All right, guys, so that will do it for this episode here. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about Art in Motion and all of these cool cars. And of course, before my next video, I'll be catching you over on Instagram at vintage_and_vinyl. And I hope, as always, folks, that you will stay in, stay safe, and binge YouTube.